Alchemists were burned at the stake for something that doesn't exist. Kai knew this for a fact. 6 years of synthesizing compounds had taught him that no cauldron could brew a miracle. And then his hand passed through the museum glass, and he found himself inside a legend, 3 days before the Inquisition arrived. But let's go back a couple of minutes. Kai Wester stands in front of display case number 17 in an empty museum. Tuesday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The curator is dozing at the entrance. The label reads, Venator's Cauldron, Aurelius's Last Alchemist, executed by burning in 1247. Kai smirks. The bronze cauldron on a velvet cushion looks like it belongs at a flea market. He pulls out his phone to take a picture of the sign. The phone slips. Kai jerks to catch it. His palm hits the glass. The glass is cold, then hot. Then there is no glass. His fingers touch the bronze and everything goes dark. The smell returns first. Sulfur, wormwood, something sour and acrid. Kai opens his eyes. Above him is a low ceiling with beams blackened by soot. Stone beneath his back. Next to him is that very cauldron, only the bronze shines like new and a dark liquid gurgles inside. Kai sits up. His head is spinning. Around him is a bench, a counter, shelves lined with jars, bundles of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling. 47 jars. The chemist's mind counts them on its own. On the counter is a scroll. Kai unrolls the brittle yellow paper. The letters are unfamiliar, but he understands every word. And here, logic breaks down for the first time. Venator writes that the shop now belongs to Kai, that the cauldron has bound them together, that there is no turning back until Kai brews the potion that Venator himself did not have time to make. A potion that grants a permanent skill, forever. Kai peeks into the cauldron. The liquid freezes. The surface is smooth as a mirror, and text appears on it. White letters on a black surface. Cool. An alchemist of the forbidden age. Venator's knowledge is loading. 10% available. The Inquisition is searching for the shop. 72 hours until discovery. Kai recoils, leans in again. The text is still there. He breathes on the surface. The letters blur and reform. The cauldron acts as a screen. His brain refuses to believe it. His eyes see it. 3 days. In 3 days, someone will come and find him. And judging by how Venator ended things, it won't be a friendly visit. Kai looks around. 15 paces long, 10 wide. The door is boarded up from the outside. The windows are boarded up. He's locked in a dead alchemist's workshop in 1247. No money, no weapons, no skills. Just a head full of organic chemistry. 47 jars of ingredients. And a cauldron that functions as a mass spectrometer in a bronze casing. In his lab, there was a fume hood and 3 levels of security. Here, there's a hole in the ceiling and a bat hanging in the corner, watching him with one eye. The conditions are roughly equal. Kai grabs the jars one by one. As soon as he picks up a jar, the cauldron hums softly, and a name floats to the surface. Minotaur's horn. Moon salt collected during a full moon. Salamander blood good for another 4 days. Fairy bones. Dust from a gargoyle's wings. None of this exists in his world. All of it sits here on the shelves. Kai mentally asks the cauldron what he can brew. The surface ripples. Potion of heightened senses. Enhanced hearing and vision for 4 hours. Moon salt. Night moth extract. Dew from a weaver spider's web. Low difficulty. The recipe is laid out like in a cookbook. Heat. Add salt. Wait for it to dissolve. Pour in the extract. Stir. Add the dew. Cool. But Kai grasps the main point. Proportions. The Venator worked by eye. Roughly this much. On the tip of a knife. But Kai has been working with precise dosages for 6 years. The difference between medicine and poison is a matter of milligrams. He'll do better. The side effects are listed in small print on the recipe: headache, nausea, disorientation. In his world, such a safety profile would be deemed unacceptable. Kai lays out the ingredients, sniffs each one, rubs them between his fingers. The moon salt is pure, fine crystals without impurities. The moth extract smells of violets and acetone. Dew from the spiderweb gives it an opalescent sheen. A protein-based colloidal solution. Kai knows what to do with these. The fire under the cauldron flares up the moment he places his hand on the rim. He doesn't pull it back. There's no time to be scared. Instead of a pipette, a wooden spoon that he measures out with a knife. Instead of a thermometer, his own palm. Instead of a timer, a mental count. The potion changes color 3 times. Transparent turns blue. Blue turns silvery. Silvery fades to colorless with an opalescent sheen. The cauldron delivers the result. The quality is excellent. No side effects. Duration: 6 hours instead of 4. Kai exhales. He optimized a medieval recipe in 40 minutes. He pours the potion into 3 vials, 3 doses, 12 gold pieces each, 36 if a buyer can be found. Kai looks at the vials, at the boarded-up door, at the cauldron, at the bat. The bat yawns. He studied molecules for 6 years. Now molecules must save his life. One task remains: to get out of the boarded-up shop before the Inquisition enters it. Kai stood in front of the boarded-up door and thought. The boards were nailed on the outside, sturdy, thick. The nails driven deep. With bare hands can't handle it. He looked the shop once time. Behind the counter there a box with tools: venator, tongs, mortar, pestle, 2 knives, iron rod that is an elbow for stirring. Kai took rod. He walked to the door. He stuck the end through the between the boards and pressed down. The wood creaked. The first board gave way to 3rd attempt, the second on the 5th. Kai broke out in a sweat. His hands had grown to pipettes and not to iron rods. The 3rd board he peeled from meat and a nail scratched across the palm. Blood. Kai wrapped his hand with a rag from the shelf and continued. 20 minutes the door was free. He pushed it and into face hit. A side street, narrow, dirty. The walls of the kids on both sides rose so high that the sky was just a strip. The pavement made rough stone, the stench from sewage ditch. Kai went out and squinted. The air was different, thick, alive. Without impurities, exhaust that he inhaled every day. Instead, that manure and smoke and something sweet from the bakery somewhere far away. He took a step, a second. The pavement was wet. Under my feet. The alley led onto a larger. Kai stopped at the corner and looked. People. Dozens. People. Clothes made coarse fabric, leather apron, raincoats with hoods, wagons, horses. The boy was a goose with a stick across the pavement. A woman was carrying a basket of bread on her head. No one didn't look at Kaya. He glanced at himself. His clothes, jeans, sneakers, gray t-shirt with the boar. It looked like crazy, or a foreigner, or like both at once. Kai returned to shop. On the shelves on jars he found a bundle with clothes, a shirt, pants made coarse canvas, leather apron. Apparently Venator left in this. Kai changed clothes. The shirt was too big. The pants were too short. The apron fit like a glove. He looked at himself in reflection of the war. A skinny guy with dark circles under his off in baggy shirt. It'll do as an apprentice. Kai hid his clothes under the counter. The phone was dead. The screen didn't respond. He shoved it under there too. Then he took a single vial of potion and went out. He needed a customer. He needed money. He needed information about how this city worked and who the Inquisition was and where it was based. The street led to the market square. Kai walked and looked around. Aurelis was a big city. 2- and 3-story houses, signs above the doors. A blacksmith, a baker, a furrier. Kai counted his steps and turns. He memorized the route. After 4 turns, he came out onto the square and stopped. Large, noisy, rows of shops, the shouts of hawkers, the smell of roasted meat and fresh leather. And in the center of the square stood a pillar, wooden, blackened, its base lined with brushwood. Kai realized what it was, a pillar for burnings. Alchemists were burned on it. Venator had been burned on it, and in 70 hours they could burn him on it. Kai turned away and walked along the market stalls. He needed to find the right buyer, not a guard, not a merchant. Someone who understood the value of what lay in the vial. Someone who needed what the gods had denied. He found her an hour later, or rather she found him. Kai was standing by the tavern wall, trying to figure out the menu by the smells coming from the kitchen, when someone's fingers touched his belt. He reacted without thinking. He grabbed the hand, a slender wrist, a girl, young, dark hair tied in a bun, eyes gray and quick. She flinched. Kai held on. She kicked him in the shin. Kai didn't let go. She stopped struggling and looked at him with an expression that clearly said she was weighing her chances of breaking his nose. Kai said there was nothing to steal from him, that he didn't have a single coin, that he was new in town. She said she could tell, that his shirt was stolen, that his hands were too clean for a laborer and too soft for a nobleman, and that he smelled of sulfur. Kai let go of her wrist. He asked if sulfur smelled bad. She replied that alchemists smelled of sulfur, and alchemists get burned, and that she didn't care because she was a thief, not a snitch. Her name was Mira Cole, 25 years old, a thief and a middleman. She stole wallets and sold information, and had never once turned a client over to the Inquisition. Kai took out a vial. Mira looked at it. She asked what it was. Kai explained. A potion to sharpen the senses. Hearing like a cat's, vision like a hawk's. 6 hours, no side effects. Mira laughed. She said he was either a charlatan or a dead man, and that there wasn't much difference. Kai offered her a taste. For free, the first dose on the house. Mira looked at him for a long time. Then she took the vial, opened it, sniffed it, winced, took a sip, a small one, a cautious one. Kai counted the seconds. At the 12th second, Mira blinked. At the 15th, her pupils dilated. At the 20th, she turned her head toward the tavern and froze. Then she looked at Kai. She said she could hear the tavern owner counting coins on the 2nd floor. 34 silver coins, 2 gold, 1 counterfeit, and that behind the wall in the alley, a rat was gnawing on a bone, and that a woman 3 houses down had a crying child. Mira took another sip. Her eyes changed, not just gray, silver. She looked at Kai as if she could see every pore on his face. She said she wanted 5 more of those flasks. Kai replied that it cost money, 12 gold pieces per flask. Mira whistled. She said she didn't have that kind of money, but she had something better. Clients. People who need things that don't exist in this world. She knew a mercenary whom the gods had denied a skill at birth. 32 years old and not a single gift. He would pay any price for what others received for free. Kai listened. His brain calculated. Mira was the perfect sales channel. A middleman with a network of contacts, a person on the street, eyes and ears he didn't have. He offered her 15% of every sale. Mira haggled for 3 minutes, agreed to 15, said she steals wallets, not the future. They returned to the alley. Kai showed her the shop. Mira looked around. She touched the jars. She sniffed the air. She looked at the cauldron. She asked why he was staring at the pot. Kai replied that this pot was smarter than half of his university. Mira didn't understand the word university. Kai said it was a place where people paid money to learn things that wouldn't be useful later. Mira nodded and said it was like a temple. Kai laughed. for the first time all day. Mira left an hour later, with 2 vials, one for the unskilled mercenary, one to show other potential customers. Kai was left alone in the shop. He looked at the cauldron. The text on the surface had changed. Venator's knowledge, 12%. Time until detection, 61 hours. 12% instead of 10. The knowledge was loading, slowly, but it was loading. Kai sat down on the floor next to the cauldron. He placed his hand on its warm side. The cauldron hummed quietly, like a computer in standby mode. 61 hours. He had 2 potions to sell, 1 thief among his allies, and 12% of the knowledge of a man who had been burned at the stake. Kai closed his eyes. Through the wall he could hear water dripping somewhere. Steady, even, like a countdown timer. Mira returned to the morning, not alone. The her followed a man, broad shoulders, taller Kaya on a head, the scar across left eyebrow to cheekbone, hands as a blacksmith, leather chest over a shirt, sword on belt. He entered the and stopped. He looked at the shelves. A kettle, Kaya in baggy shirt, and along his face it clear that he was... Mira said that it was Wolfstone, 32 years old, mercenary, no skill. Kai looked at him. Wolf looked at response, a heavy gaze of a man who has been too often. Wolf spoke first. He said that Mira had shown him a vial, that he had, as she hears a whisper through 3 walls. What? He doesn't believe in alchemy because that alchemists are charlatans, but that does believes Mira because that she never once has lied in 5 years. And so he didn't not for intense sensations. He needs strength. Kai asked why. Wolf was silent, then said that he works as a mercenary 12 years. What takes that others don't take. What fights better than people with skills. But without the skill the ceiling is the middle. His is hired when there's money for the best. They pay half as much. They look down. He wanted a loan in life, to go out on fight and know that he isn't any worse. Kai listened. In voice Wolf there was anger. There's something else. Fatigue. 12 years of fatigue from that the world decided to him to be. Kai turned toward the cauldron. He leaned toward surface, mentally asked about the potion of power. The text appeared. Titans of the Titan. Divine power on 1 hour. Main ingredient, the horn. Recipe, Venator. Duration, 15 minutes. Side effects, convulsions and muscle tears. Kai frowned. 15 minutes and convulsions. That was unacceptable. He read the formula more carefully. The problem was in stabilization. Venator did not control the decay active substance. The molecules were too quickly, and the release of energy was unevenly. Peak load in the first minutes and collapse at the end. How? As if someone had adrenaline without measuring the dosage. Kai knew how. Fix it. In his world, there were prolonged forms of the drugs, slow release, controlled disintegration. Need a matrix that would hold the active substance and release it gradually. He looked at the shelves. Resin from the world tree. He took the jar. The cauldron hummed. He examined the composition. A complex polymer structure, high viscosity, thermal stability. This could work as a matrix. If the resin were heated to a certain temperature, it would soften and absorb the active substance from the Minotaur's horn. As it cooled, it would seal it in. Inside the body heat would slowly dissolve the matrix and release the substance evenly. Not 15 minutes of peak load, an hour of steady power. Kai explained to Wolf that he needed time. 2 hours. Wolf nodded, sat down on the floor against the wall, placed his sword on his knees, closed his eyes. Mira remained standing by the counter, watching. Kai began to work. First, the Minotaur's horn. Dense, heavy, dark gray with red veins. The cauldron displayed the molecular composition, and Kai almost whistled. The structure resembled steroid compounds, but with elements that didn't exist in his periodic table. The fourth element in the chain had no analogues. Magic, or something this world called magic, which Kai couldn't yet explain. He ground the horn in a mortar, fine powder, uniform. Then he turned to the resin of the world tree. He heated the cauldron. He placed a piece of resin on the edge. It began to soften at a temperature Kai estimated to be 120 degrees. Slowly, thick, stretching in strands. He added the horn powder to the softened resin and began stirring, with an iron rod, slowly, counting the turns, 12 turns clockwise. The resin darkened. It turned almost black, then red, then gold. Kai added water, clean water from a clay jug in the corner. The temperature dropped. The resin began to release its substance into the solution, but slowly, controlled, exactly as he had calculated. The potion boiled for 40 minutes. Kai didn't leave the cauldron. He stirred. He counted. He monitored the color and viscosity. Mira was silent. Wolf dozed against the wall. A bat in the corner turned its head and watched the process with its other eye. When the potion cooled, the cauldron revealed the result. The elixir of Titan. Excellent quality. Divine power. Duration, 1 hour. Side effects, mild muscle fatigue after the effect wears off. Kai reread it. 1 hour instead of 15 minutes. Mild fatigue instead of convulsions and muscle tears. He had quadrupled the duration and eliminated all serious side effects. Venator had spent years on this formula. Kai improved it in 2 hours. Not because he was smarter, because he knew what Venator couldn't have known. Pharmacokinetics, controlled release, a principle that wouldn't be invented for another 700 years. Kai poured the potion into a vial. 1 dose. There were still 2 minotaur horns left. He handed the vial to Wolf. Wolf opened his eyes, stood up, took the vial, looked at the golden liquid inside, asked what would happen. Kai answered. Divine power for 1 hour. He would be able to break down a stone wall with his bare hands, lift a horse, bend a sword. Then a slight fatigue, like after a long run. And that's it. Wolf looked at the vial, then at Kai. He asked how much. Kai said 30 gold pieces. It was a test. The actual price in the Venator catalog was 600, but Kai didn't need just one client. He needed an ally. Wolf took out his wallet, counted out 30 coins, placed them on the counter, then drank the potion in 1 gulp. Nothing happened for the first 5 seconds. On the 6th, Wolf straightened up. On the 10th, his shoulders spread. Not physically, but something had changed in the way he stood, as if gravity had become lighter for him. At the 15th second, Wolf looked at his hands. He clenched his fist, unclenched it, clenched it again. He turned toward the shop wall, a stone wall 2 bricks thick, and he struck it. Without swinging, he just jabbed his fist. The wall cracked. It didn't shatter, it cracked. The crack ran from the point of impact to the ceiling. Dust rained down from the beams. A bat in the corner fluttered frantically. Mira jumped back toward the door. Wolf stood and looked at his fist. There wasn't a scratch on it. He turned to Kai, and Kai saw an expression on his face he hadn't expected to see on the face of a 32-year-old mercenary with a scar across half his face. Wolf swallowed, averted his eyes, then looked again, said quietly that Kai had given him, for 30 gold pieces, what the gods had denied him at birth, that he owed him more than his life, that he owed him self-respect. Kai replied that he didn't need a debt, he needed a man to cover the shop. Wolf nodded, once, briefly, like an oath. Mira stood by the door and looked at the crack in the wall, then at Kai. She asked what else he could brew. Kai looked at the cauldron. The surface displayed new text. Venator's knowledge, 14%. Time until detection, 49 hours. 49 hours. And somewhere in this city, Inquisitor Tess Marrow was searching for a shop that smelled of sulfur. Kai replied to Mira. He said he could brew enough to give them problems they hadn't even suspected yet. Mira smirked. She said problems were her specialty. Wolf remained silent. He stood by the wall, clenching and unclenching his fist, getting used to the sensation he'd been waiting 32 years for. 40-90 hours. Kai stood by the boiler and looked at numbers, then stopped look and started work. He needed more potions, more customers, more gold. Gold is walls, doors, locks, security, time. He welded two doses of from the remaining horn of the Minotaur, then 4 doses of heightened senses. I worked all night. I slept for hours for the floor next the boiler, huddled cheek to warm bronze. Mur came at and found him in this position. She said that he is hugging the potty. Kai replied, no opening his that the pot the only who it here understands him. Mira brought food, bread, cheese, a piece of dried meat, and the news. After overnight, she found 3 potential clients. The first was a headhunter by named Gray. He had potion to track the target that was hiding in city for week. The second was merchant from the guild. He needs do something for the negotiations, something that will give an advantage. The third was an anonymous order, the note without name. I need titans of the Titan, 20 doses. Price is important. Kai read the note. 20 doses. Had 2 ready. The vert of the Minotaur left. 20 doses meant 20 horns, which had to be somewhere in the where alchemy was heresy. Mira said that she knew the supplier, the old herbalist on outskirts Aurelis. Sells ingredients from the floor, charges expensive, doesn't ask questions. Kai sent her to the herbalist with 10 gold from those 30 that paid Wolf. Mira left. Kai was the first client. Gray came in an hour, short, muscular. He moved like a cat. 2 knives on his and one on his boot. Kai noticed the third in that as Gray put his foot slightly to the side. The chemist got used to observe minor details. Gray looked over the counter with glance. Exits, corners, shadows, professional assessment of space. Then I looked at Kaya and asked, it works? Kai gave him a vial. Gray drank it. 10 seconds froze. He turned his head. I listened. He said that he could feed of a behind 3 walls. A man, an elderly man, judging by the wheezing the lungs. Then he said that he could see a crack in stone across closed window, across the boards, through a crack in half a finger. Gray put on the counter 15 gold coins. He said that he'd 15 for 5 glasses, and left. Quietly. Just it was. Second, the client arrived around noon. A merchant, portly, red-faced, an expensive doublet, a gold chain around his neck. He introduced himself as Darren Fox, a member of the Merchants Guild. He said he had negotiations in 3 days with a supplier from the eastern provinces, that the supplier was a crook and was trying to double the price, that Darren needed an advantage. Kai thought for a moment. The Cauldron showed Voice of the Siren in his catalog. Persuasion for 30 minutes. Everything you say sounds like the truth. But his knowledge was only at 14%. The recipe for Voice of the Siren required at least 30. It wasn't available yet. Kai looked at the available recipes. There was something simpler. The Clear Mind Potion. Accelerated thinking for 2 hours. Information processing 3 times faster. Improved memory. The ingredients were on the shelves. Silver lotus pollen, owl's eye extract, morning dew distillate. Kai offered Darren the Clear Mind Potion. He explained that he wouldn't be trying to persuade his conversation partner. He would think 3 times faster. Spot lies through micro-expressions. Memorize every number. Calculate his moves. Darren listened. His little eyes sparkled. He asked how much. Kai said 40 gold pieces. Darren didn't haggle. He put down the money. He said he'd come for the potion tomorrow morning, and that if it worked, Kai would get a regular customer with a fat wallet. Darren left. Kai counted the money. 55 gold pieces for the morning, plus 30 from Wolf, minus 10 sent with Mira. 75 gold pieces in the till. He began brewing the Clear Mind potion. The process was more delicate than with the Titan elixir. The silver lotus pollen was unstable. The cauldron displayed its molecular structure, and Kai saw the problem immediately. A neuroactive compound. It affected synaptic transmission. In his world, the closest analogues were nootropics, but an order of magnitude more powerful. Venator's problem lay in purification. The owl's eye extract contained impurities that competed with the active substance for the same receptors. The result was unpredictable. Sometimes mental clarity, sometimes a headache, sometimes hallucinations. Kai removed the impurities. The method was simple: selective extraction. Different substances dissolve at different temperatures. He heated the extract to 60 degrees. The impurities precipitated out. The active ingredient remained in solution. His professor would have fainted at the sight of these ingredients, but the principles of chemistry worked here just as they did in the 21st century. The molecules obeyed the same laws. The potion turned out clear with a slight golden tint. The cauldron showed the result. The quality was excellent. Duration, 3 hours instead of 2, no side effects. Kai divided it into 4 doses, 1 for Darren, 3 for sale. Mira returned by evening, without the ingredients, with a bruise under her eye, and with information worth more than any minotaur's horn. The herbalist was dead. His shop on the outskirts had been burned down 2 days ago. The Inquisition. Mira had learned the details from the neighbors. Inquisitor Tess Marrow personally led the raid. She took all the ingredients, sealed off the ruins, interrogated everyone in the area. She was looking for the herbalist's connections to other suppliers of banned substances. Kai listened and felt a chill rise from his stomach to his throat. Tess Marrow, the sense of sin skill, a professional who had burned 14 alchemists. She wasn't some abstract threat on a timer. She was a real person who, 2 days ago, had burned down a shop 5 blocks away from him. Mira said the bruise wasn't from the raid. One of Tess's henchmen had been questioning people at the market too insistently. Mira had been eavesdropping. She'd been spotted. She'd had to flee across the roof and had landed awkwardly, face first, into a shutter. Kai asked what exactly they'd been asking. Mira answered. They'd been asking about the smell of sulfur, about strange newcomers in town, about anyone selling vials of liquid. Kai looked at the cauldron. 41 hours until discovery. Tess was looking for him. Specifically him. Maybe she didn't know who he was, didn't know where. But she knew someone was brewing potions in Aurelis, and she was narrowing the search. Kai sat down on the floor. 75 gold pieces, 6 ready-made potions, 1 mercenary with divine power for an hour, 1 thief with a black eye, and 41 hours until the bonfire. He needed a plan. Not just to brew and sell. He needed to hide the shop so that Tess Marrow would walk right past it. He looked at the catalog, flipped through the recipes, and stopped at one. Silver mist. Phase shift. The object becomes intangible for 20 minutes. Passes through walls. In Venator's recipe, the probability of getting stuck inside a wall was 50%. But Kay didn't need to pass through walls. He needed the wall to pass through those searching behind it. He needed the entrance to the shop to become invisible. A door that looks like a wall you can't touch because your hand passes right through it, yet your eye sees stone. The recipe required 20% knowledge. He had 14. But his knowledge was growing by the hour. Kai pressed his palm against the cauldron. The warm bronze hummed. Somewhere deep within the liquid, symbols flickered. Venator's formulas loaded into his head like files on a slow connection. He had to wait until he reached 20%. And he had a plan. Kai didn't sleep. He sat by the boiler and waited. Every hour he leaned toward surface and checked the numbers. 15%, 16, 17. Formulas Venator manifested in his mind as photographs in a tank. At first, faint outlines, then the details, then sharpness. He began to see connections between the ingredients of Kai had noticed before. Moon salt was not just a crystal, it was a catalyst. She amplified the effect of active substance in 4 times if he added it to the right moment. Venator knew that, but didn't why. Kai didn't why. Crystal lattice of the salt dissolves dissolution, released ions which were incorporated into the potions and altered their conformation. Discovered active centers. They created the molecule accessible for receptors. In his world, it was called allosteric modulation. Here, it was called lunar magic. At dawn, the cauldron showed 18%. Kai stood up. He stretched his neck. His cracked. He's 26 and body was itself like an old man. 2 days on the floor. Food 2 times a day. Continuous operation. In university at the day, although he could make coffee, here was coffee. They will be delivered to Europe in 300 years. Kai added this to list of to I missed. Mira came with food and a new bruise, this time on forearm. She said that was looking an alternative supplier for ingredients and found one, the black in the district. Smugglers. Ingredients from the sea. Prices 3 times higher the usual. But the horn of the Minotaur is there, 20 of them, 8 gold for piece, 160 gold pieces. At Kaya had 70. They're enough. Mira said that the smugglers take a deposit, half now, half upon receipt. 80 gold pieces. All the same wasn't enough. Kai looked at his supplies. 4 doses of mind, 3 potions of heightened senses, 2 doses of Titan. If sell all at full price, he will better the amount. But then he will give to Darren the potion and stay without supply. And this is safety net. Insurance is life. Kai made a decision. He gave Mira 75 gold coins. All that was. He said, "Find the missing 5. Mira looked at him. She asked where she find 5 gold coins. Kai said that she a thief. Mira smiled. She replied that she steals wallets and not trust. And what 5 gold will find in an hour. She left. Kai stayed without money, without food. At 9 jars potions and 30-70 clocks before the bonfire, he continued wait. Darren Fox arrived exactly as promised. Morning. Kai gave him potion of mind. Darren paid, 40 gold pieces. Kai immediately set aside 30 for Mira for the second half payment to the smugglers. 10 kept for food and contingencies expenses. Then came Mir. He took 3 doses of the potion of emotion. I paid 36. Kai put this money. 30 on horns, 6 for life. By noon, the boiler showed 19%, 1%. Kai walked along the green from the corner to corner, 4 steps to one side, 4 in the other. Mouse bat in the corner. She watched him, turning her head. Kai called her Dean, because she looked at him with the same silent disapproval as the dean of the chemistry department did when Kai was late for morning seminars. 19.5. The formulas for silver mist were emerging at the edge of his consciousness. He saw the general idea but not the details. Phase shift. A change in the state of matter without a change in temperature. In his world, that would be a violation of thermodynamics. Here, it was a recipe on the cauldron's page. 20%. The text appeared clearly. Silver mist. A phase shift for 20 minutes. The object becomes permeable. Ingredients: moonstone dust, mist essence gathered before dawn, phase, serpent scales. Kai checked the shelves. The moonstone dust was there. Jar number 31. The mist essence was there. Jar number 12. Phase snake scales. Jar number 44. 4 scales remained at the bottom, each the size of a pinky fingernail, thin translucent, shimmering like an oil slick. The cauldron displayed the molecular composition of the scales, and Kai froze. It was impossible. The molecule's structure existed in two states simultaneously, like Schrödinger's cat. The molecule was both solid and gaseous at the same time. Quantum superposition at the molecular level, visible to the naked eye. His professor wouldn't have fainted. His professor would have quit his profession. Kai set to work. Venator's recipe called for dissolving the scales in mist essence and adding moonstone dust. Simple. Crude. A 50-50 chance the object would get stuck in the wall. Because the phase shift was uneven. One part of the body passed through matter while the other remained solid. Kai saw the reason. The scales weren't dissolving completely. Larger fragments retained their superposition, while smaller ones lost it upon contact with the essence. The solution was elementary. Don't dissolve the scales whole. Grind them into a uniform powder. Every particle the same size. Identical behavior. A uniform phase shift throughout the entire volume. Kai ground the scales in a mortar. For a long time. Thoroughly. Until the powder became so fine that it rose into the air with his breath. And shimmered. The air in the workshop became visible for a second. Then the powder settled. Kai poured it into the cauldron. He added the mist essence, moonstone dust. He heated it. The potion didn't change color. It changed state. The liquid turned into gas and back into liquid. It pulsed. It breathed. After 30 minutes, the cauldron showed the result. Silver mist. Excellent quality. 0% chance of getting stuck. Duration, 30 minutes instead of 20. Kai exhaled. 0%. He had eliminated the main side effect completely. But he didn't need to walk through walls. He needed to apply the potion to a door, to make the entrance invisible. He reread the description. The potion affected the object to which it was applied. A person drank it and became transparent. But what if he applied it to a wall? The wall would become transparent. Visually, it would remain in place, but a hand would pass right through it. Tess Marrow would come into the alley. She would see the wall, a solid stone wall with no door. She would walk on. Kai stepped out into the alley. He looked at the shop door. Wooden, old, conspicuous. He needed to brick it up, fill it with stone, and then apply the potion to the masonry. The stone would remain visible but become permeable. His own people would pass through. Strangers wouldn't figure it out. Kai went back inside. He needed a mason. Or Wolf. Wolf arrived an hour after Mira found him in the mercenary quarter. The Titan elixir's effect had long since worn off, but Wolf still moved differently, more confidently, like a man who knows what he's capable of. Kai explained the plan. Wolf listened, nodded. Left and returned 2 hours later with a cart of stones. Didn't ask where he got them. Kai didn't ask. Wolf bricked up the doorway in 40 minutes. The masonry was rough but solid. From the outside, the alley looked like a dead end. 2 walls and not a single door. Kai applied silver mist to the fresh masonry. The stones absorbed the liquid. For a second, they became translucent, then gray and solid-looking again. Kai held out his hand. His fingers passed through the stone, as if through mist. A chill on his skin, a tingling sensation, and he was standing on the outside. Wolf looked at the wall, at Kai on the other side of the wall that looked like a wall but wasn't one. He shook his head, said he hadn't seen anything like it in 32 years. Mira returned in the evening, with confirmation from the smugglers. The horns would be here in 2 days. She walked through the wall and stumbled in surprise. She cursed, said he should have warned her. Then she touched the stone from the inside. Her hand passed right through it. Mira pulled her hand back. She touched it again. She laughed. She said that Kai was crazy. Kai looked at the cauldron. 21%. 35 hours until detection. But there was nothing to detect now. The alley led to a dead end. The wall was a wall. The shop had vanished. Kai sat down on the floor. For the first time in 3 days, the tension eased. Not completely, but enough for his hands to stop shaking. He was alive. The shop was hidden. There were customers. The Minotaur's horns were coming. Now he had to take the next step. Stop surviving and start building. 35 hours had passed. Nothing happened. Kai stood by the wall and listened. Silence. The alley was empty. The timer on surface, the boiler, flashed and disappeared. Instead, a new line. Detection is deferred. Masking is active. Next check in 14 days. Kai exhaled so deeply that it my head. 14 days. 2 weeks. A whole eternity by compared to 3 days. He sat on the floor and sat there 10 minutes just staring at the ceiling. The dean was in corner up head and slept. Mira came with the horns of the Minotaur. 20 of them. Each is a palm. Dark gray with red veins. Smugglers didn't. Kai checked every boiler. Boiler. Clean. No impurities. More powerful. Those that remained from Venator. Mira explained that these horns from the southern islands where the Minotaurs are larger and more vicious. Kai started work. 20 doses of the Titan. Anonymous order. He worked 12 hours straight. The process was well established. Grinding the horn, preparation, the dye from resin worldwood, controlled release. Each dose is identical the previous one. Standardization. In his world it was called proper industrial practice. Here, a revolution. Venator brewed a potion as a unique work of art. Kai brewed a series. Identical. Predictable. Each glass yielded exactly 1 hour of divine power and exactly 0 side effects. To morning, 20 glasses were in a row on the counter, golden liquid in each one, the same level, the same shade. Mira looked at Roe and said that it beautiful. Kai said that it chemistry. Mira took the vials. She returned after 4 hours with a bag. In bag there, 400 gold coins, 20 doses of 20 gold pieces. Kai set a price, lower the list price. 600 gold per a dose was greed. 20 was a strategy. Anonymous client was return. Kai asked Mira who it was. Mira shook her head. She said that went through 3 intermediaries. She had only the last one. A young guy in uniform, city guard. Kai paused to think. City guard. 20 doses of potion. Someone was arming the squad. That was not his business. For now. He counted the money. 400 gold plus the balance from previous sales. 416 gold coins. More than the average resident Aurelis earned in a year. Kai made a list. He needed equipment. Not wooden spoons and clay bowls. Real instruments. Glass flasks, measuring vessels, filters, scales. He described to Mira what he needed. Mira listened with the expression of someone who doesn't understand half the words but remembers everything. She left. She returned 2 days later with half the list. The glassblower in the market square made flasks according to Kai's description. Rough, uneven, but functional. The apothecary sold him measuring vessels and filter cloth. Kai held his first flask in his hands, crooked, with air bubbles in the glass. But it was a flask. His flask. In his laboratory. He felt at home for the first time in a week. Venator's knowledge had reached 25%. New recipes were discovered every day. A regeneration potion. Wound healing 10 times faster. A chameleon potion. Changing one's appearance for 6 hours. A stone skin potion. Resistance to physical damage for 40 minutes. Every recipe contained Venator's mistakes, and every one Kai could improve. Venator's regeneration was painful. The tissues healed, but the nerve endings burned like fire. Kai added an analgesic component from silver willow bark to the formula. Venator's chameleon potion produced a random appearance. Kai stabilized the process and added the ability to set parameters. Venator's stone skin limited mobility. Kai altered the structure of the protective layer, making it elastic. The number of clients was growing. Gray came every 3 days for the potion of emotions. Darren won the negotiations with the supplier and returned with an order for 10 doses of the potion of clear mind for his entire trading office. New faces appeared. A huntress from the northern forests with broken ribs that hadn't healed for 2 months. The regeneration potion mended them overnight. A diplomat from the embassy of the eastern provinces who needed to change his appearance for the duration of secret negotiations. A bodyguard for the city magistrate who needed stone skin for the duration of a public procession. Everyone paid. Everyone returned. Everyone brought someone else. Mira kept track. Kai gave her a separate journal. She recorded clients by the names they chose for themselves. No real names. Raven, Fox, Gray Lady, Blacksmith. Mira gave herself the code name Feather. Kai asked why. She said that a feather is light and inconspicuous, and that a feather can sign a death warrant. Kai kept a second journal. Alchemical symbols on some pages, chemical formulas on the others. Mira peeked in and asked what language it was. Kai replied that it was one that hadn't been invented yet. Mira shrugged and said it was strange but useful. By the end of the second week, there were more than 2,000 gold pieces in the till. Kai spent carefully. Ingredients, equipment, food, Mira's pay. A small stipend for Wolf to guard the alley. Wolf came every evening and sat at the entrance to the alley until dawn. Without the elixir, just sitting there, with a sword on his lap. Kai asked why he was doing this without being paid in potions. Wolf replied that some debts aren't measured in gold. Venator's knowledge had reached 30%. And Kai saw the recipe for the siren's voice. Persuasion for 30 minutes. Everything you say sounds like the truth. Highly addictive. The last 2 words were underlined in Venator's formula. Highly addictive. Kai read the recipe 3 times. The problem was serious. The active ingredient affected the listener's dopamine receptors, not the speakers, the listeners. The siren's voice didn't make the words true. It caused the listener to derive pleasure from agreement. Chemical pleasure, like a drug. The listener agreed because agreeing felt good, and wanted to hear more. Venator knew this. A note in the recipe said that 2 of his clients had returned a week later, not for a new dose for themselves. They wanted the person who had received the voice to speak to them again. They had become addicted to someone else's voice. Kai set the recipe aside. It was a weapon, not a tool. A weapon that turned people into addicts. He could improve it. Remove the addiction. Create pure persuasion without the side effect of drug dependence. But was it worth it? Kai thought about it all day. By evening, he had decided. Yes, it was worth it. Persuasion without addiction is a tool of diplomacy, not enslavement. A knife can kill. A knife can slice bread. The difference isn't in the knife. The difference is in the hand. He reworked the formula, removed the dopamine component, replaced it with an oxytocin analog from moon jasmine extract. Trust instead of pleasure. The listener won't become addicted. They'll simply be inclined toward the speaker, open to dialogue, ready to listen. The decision remains with the listener. Free will remains intact. The Cauldron showed results. The siren's voice, modified. Persuasion for 40 minutes, no addiction. Kai poured the potion, 4 doses. The price is 2,000 gold per dose in the Venator catalog. Kai set the price at 500. Mira looked at the vials of pale blue liquid. She asked what it was. Kai explained. Mira was silent for a moment. Then she said she knew who needed it, and that they were dangerous people. Kai asked how dangerous. Mira replied, the palace. A client turned out to be not the person Kai expected. Mira brought him at night. Through the wall, a man entered and stopped in the middle of the shop. A dark coat with a hood, gloves, not a single exposed patch of skin. He took his and Kai saw a woman, about 40, delicate features, a strand in black hair, eyes dark and alert. She introduced herself as Lyra Wayne, the advisor to the court Aurelis. Kai didn't know what meant advisor at the court. Mira then explained, the third person in the country, after the king and chancellor. Lyra Wayne came not for voice of the siren. She came to watch at the man who brews potions skills. She used to around the shop. She hid the jars. I read the labels. I asked questions. Precise questions. How does effect last? What is percentage failure rate? Are any side effects? Is addictive? Kai replied. Lyra was listening. No once did interrupted. Not once did doubted it. She talked with him as an equal. This was unfamiliar. In this world, the alchemist stood below a blacksmith. The liar ignored. After 30 minutes, she asked the question. She asked if Kai brew a potion that will the skill permanent. Kai answered honestly, not. But it is on it. Lyra nodded. She said she would buy 4 doses of Siren's voice, and that she would soon be holding negotiations that would determine the fate of the eastern provinces. That thousands of lives depended on whether she said the right words to the right people. Kai handed over 4 vials. Lyra placed a small bag on the counter. 2,000 gold pieces. Kai opened his mouth. He had quoted 500 per dose. Lyra paid the vendor's list price. She looked at him and said she wasn't paying for the potion. She was paying for silence. Kai shut his mouth. Lyra left. A cloak, a hood, gloves, through the wall and into the night. Mira looked at the bag of gold and said that they now had a problem they didn't have before. Kai asked what it was. Mira replied, when the palace knows about you, the Pantheon will soon find out too. The 9 gods of Aurelis, the very ones who bestowed skills at birth, the very ones whose monopoly Kai was destroying with every vial sold. Kai sat down on the floor. 4,000 gold pieces in the cash register. 12 regular customers. The shop hidden behind an invisible wall. And he had just sold potions to a 3rd-ranking official of the state, who would go into negotiations armed with his chemistry. And if the negotiations succeeded, someone would inevitably ask how. And the thread would stretch. To the alley. To the wall that isn't a wall. To him. Kai looked at the cauldron. 32%. Formulas were unlocking one after another. Somewhere deep within Venator's data array, something enormous was flickering. A recipe for a permanent skill. Encrypted. Fragmented. Kai saw it out of the corner of his mind like a figure behind frosted glass. Huge, complex, requiring ingredients that weren't in a single jar on the shelves. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, he realized he'd slept for 3 hours. Mira had covered him with a blanket. A bowl of porridge stood on the counter. A note lay nearby. 3 new clients are waiting tomorrow. One of them is not human. Kai reread the last sentence. One of them is not human. He arrived the next day. Mira was right. He walked through the wall and filled half the shop. He was as tall as the doorway. Broad, skin with a golden sheen, eyes without pupils, pure white gold. He was dressed like a human, a doublet, boots, a cloak, but he wasn't human. Every movement was too fluid, too precise, like a mechanism encased in skin. He called himself the avatar of Valkur, the god of war, one of the 9. Kai stood behind the counter and looked at the creature that represented a god. His hands didn't tremble. This surprised him. Maybe because he had already been living for 2 weeks in a world where minotaurs were suppliers of ingredients and phase snakes shed their skin, leaving behind scales. The god of war was simply the next item on the list of the impossible. The avatar spoke in an even voice, without inflection. Valkur knew about the shop. He knew about the skill potions. He knew that someone was selling what only gods could grant. Valcour wasn't angry. Valcour was interested. The Avatar said that Valcour was at odds with the other gods of the pantheon, that he needed an army stronger than the other 8, that the Titan elixir in the hands of his guard would tip the balance of power. He proposed a deal, an exclusive contract. Kai would brew potions only for Valcour. Valcour would protect the shop from the Inquisition and the other gods. 100,000 gold pieces up front. Kai listened. 100,000 gold pieces. Protection from the Inquisition. Protection from the gods. It sounded like the solution to all his problems. And it smelled like a trap. Kai asked for time to think it over. The Avatar nodded, said Kai had 7 days, and left. Through the wall. A golden glow in the alley and silence. Mira sat in the corner, pale. She said she'd seen avatars before at city festivals, but never at arm's length, and that she didn't like his eyes. Kai replied that he didn't like the offer. Exclusivity meant slavery. Beautiful, golden, but slavery. He hadn't traveled back in time to become a weapons supplier for a god, but to refuse the god of war meant becoming his enemy. Kai sat down by the cauldron. He needed a plan, a real one, not survival, not trade, a strategy. He leaned toward the surface and, for the first time, asked the cauldron not about recipes. He asked about Venator, who he was, why he was killed, what he knew that made the gods send the Inquisition after him. The surface rippled. For a long time. A minute. 2. Then text. But not white as usual. Red. Venator knew the truth. Skills are not a gift from the gods. Skills are chemistry. Molecular structures built into the body at birth. The gods didn't create skills. The gods took the formulas from the one who created them. From the 10th god. The god of alchemy. Who was killed by the other 9. Kai recoiled. The 10th god. Killed. His formulas stolen. Divided among the 9. The monopoly on skills is built on murder and lies. The cauldron displayed another line. The 10th god's body has not been destroyed. It is hidden. Beneath the great temple of Aurelis. The final formula lies in his blood. The formula for a permanent skill. Kai sat on the floor and stared at the red letters. Venator died trying to get to that blood. Kai now knew why. And he knew that Valcour knew too. The god of war didn't want the potion. He wanted the formula. A monopoly in one set of hands instead of 9. 7 days to respond. Kai closed his eyes. When he opened them, the cauldron showed 33%. 7 days. Kai spent the first 2 pondering options. Go ahead the deal Valcour meant safety and gold. And a cage. God of war will a monopoly on potions. The rest, 8 gods will unite against him. War. Kai will find in the epicenter. Not as a player, as a resource. To refuse meant war of another kind. A personal one. Valcour doesn't rejections. The Avatar will return, but not with a proposal. The third option appeared in the 3rd day. Kai was sitting by the boiler and was rereading the red text about the 10th god, when in the shop, a man whose he had expected. Short, thin, shaven head, brown cassock girdled with a rope, sandals on bare monk. He entered through the wall and even didn't surprised. He stopped. I looked around. I looked at Kaya. Introduced myself as Brother Emmerich, 40 years old, servant of the temple, custodian of the library. Kai became wary. The temple. That very under which the body of the slain god. Emmerich said that had come not from the pantheon, came on my own. That's that 20 years has been books at Library of the Day, and 20 years has been questions for which no one answers. Answer. Why are distributed unevenly? Why are some are born without skills? Why formulas, skills anywhere are recorded if the gods are generous? Emmerich said that he had heard about the shop. No, from Mira. Not from clients. From books. In the library he found a reference to Venator. Not as a heretic, as a scholar. A 300 years old described an alchemist who claimed that skills can be synthesized. The entry was marked as destroyed, but Emmerich found a copy walled up in the myth of the basement. Kai listened. Emmerich didn't know a fanatic. He was a traitor. He was a doubter. A man who believed 20 years and then found a crack in the foundation of the ant and could stop picking at it. Emmerich suggested a trade. He gives Kai access to the temple library, all the archives, all the basements, all the walled-up rooms. Kai gives Emmerich the truth. What skills really are. Kai agreed, without hesitation. The temple library is a map of the building beneath which lies the body of the 10th god. A map to the formula for a permanent skill. Emmerich left and returned the following night with a tube. Inside were copies of the temple's blueprints. Emmerich had drawn them from memory for 12 hours. Kai spread the blueprints out on the counter. The great temple of Aurelis. 6 floors above ground, 3 below. The lower levels are off limits to everyone except the high priest. Guards at every passageway. Magical seals on the doors. Emmerich pointed to a spot on the plan, the lowest level. A chamber with no entrance, walls 5 meters thick. On the map, it was marked with a single word, Ark. Emmerich said that in 20 years he had never once seen anyone go in there, or come out. He didn't know what was inside. Kai knew. The body of the 10th god. Kai studied the plans for 2 days. He counted, he measured, he mapped out routes. 3 underground levels, each was guarded. The first level was a repository of relics. The guards changed every 4 hours, 2 at the entrance, 2 inside. The second level was an archive of forbidden texts. 1 door, a magical seal, no entry without a key. The third level is the Ark. Walls without doors, 5 meters of stone. And somewhere behind them lies the very thing for which Venator died. The silver mist could carry him through the walls. But 5 meters, 30 minutes of potions effect. Would it be enough? Kai calculated. Speed of passing through matter, density of the stone, length of the path. Just barely. 30 minutes to pass through 5 meters of stone one way. The potion wouldn't last for the return trip. He needed a second dose inside the Ark, or another way back. Kai looked at the cauldron. 36%. New recipes, new possibilities. But none solved the problem of 5 meters of stone. He worked on both fronts. By day he brewed potions for clients. By night he studied plans and formulas. The number of clients grew to 15, then 18. Rumors spread through Aurelis like smoke. No one knew where the shop was. Everyone knew it existed. On the 5th day of the 7 given by Valcour, what Kai feared happened. Wolf arrived with news. Rumors at the palace. Someone had used the voice of the siren at the reception for the Eastern ambassadors. The negotiations went brilliantly, too brilliantly. The Eastern ambassadors agreed to all the terms in half an hour. Nothing like this had ever happened in the history of Aurelis diplomacy. Questions. An investigation. Quiet for now. But someone is already looking for the source. Kai clenched his teeth. Lyra Vane, court advisor. She used the potion during official negotiations, in public, in front of witnesses. The modified voice of the siren wasn't addictive, but it worked, and it was noticeable. The thread began to unravel. On the 6th day, Emmerich arrived, pale. His hands were shaking. He said there was an alarm at the temple. The high priest had convened a council. One of the gods had sensed a disturbance, not a physical one, metaphysical. Someone had used a skill they shouldn't have had. The gods sensed every skill in the city. Every skill they had bestowed at birth was marked, like a signature. Kai's potions granted skills without a signature, pure, unmarked. To the gods, it was like hearing a voice in an empty room, a voice that shouldn't be there. Kai realized the scale of the problem. Not the Inquisition, not the palace, the gods. The 9 living gods who sensed every one of his potions as an interference in their own network. Every vial sold was a signal. He went live every time a client drank his potion. Until now, the signals had been weak, isolated. A potion of the senses, a potion of clear mind, trifles. But the voice of the siren used at the diplomatic reception was a scream. There was 1 day left until Valkyr's reply. Kai gathered everyone, Mira, Wolf, Emmerich, 4 people in a small shop behind an invisible wall. He told them everything, about the 10th god, about the body beneath the temple, about the formula in the blood, about how skills are chemistry and gods are usurpers. Wolf listened in silence. His face didn't change. 32 years without a skill. He had always known the system was unjust. Now he learned it was also built on lies. Mira cursed, quietly and creatively. Emmerich sat on the floor, staring into space. 20 years of faith crumbled in 5 minutes. Kai laid out a plan. He wouldn't accept Valkyr's deal, nor would he refuse it. He would propose a counter-deal. Not an exclusive, a partnership. A limited supply of potions in exchange for one thing: access to the temple. Valkyr is a god. He can enter places a mortal cannot. He can guide Kai through the first 2 levels, to the wall of the Ark. Beyond that lies the silver mist. Valkyr won't know why. Kai will say he needs ingredients from the Ark for a permanent skill recipe, which, technically, would be true. The blood of the 10th god is the ingredient. Mira said it was madness. Wolf said he was coming. Emmerich paused and said he would draw a detailed map of the lower levels based on the records he'd seen in the Forbidden Archive. Kai looked at them. A thief. A mercenary without a skill. A monk who lost his faith. And a chemist from the future. Against the 9 gods. The odds were about the same as for his thesis. His advisor had also said it was madness. Kai defended it with flying colors. Avatar Valkyra entered the on 7th day exactly at dawn. Golden eyes without pupils, motionless face. He stood at the counter and waited. Kai stood across from him. Between them a kettle, warm, humming. Kai began to speak. He said that he accepted the exclusive. Avatar didn't, Kai continued. He said that proposed a partnership. Limited supply of Titan for the of Valkyr. 30 doses per month, price negotiable. In exchange, Kai asks one thing: access to the Great Temple. Once time. On one night. The Avatar remained silent 10 seconds, then asked why. Kai answered, ingredients, rare, impossible to get in any way, required for the formula, formulas for skill. When the word permanent changed in golden eyes, not expression. Avatars did have expressions. Light. Eyes became brighter for a fraction of Valkyr, for his avatar heard a word that wanted here. Permanent skill. Permanent. For the army. Avatar said that Valkyr will consider the proposal, and left. Kai exhaled. The first part is done. Now to wait. Wait he could. That's why he worked. Knowledge. Venator reached 38%. Each new percent opened a layer. The formulas became more complex, deeper. Venator was just alchemist. He was a genius. 40 years of research built into system which struck Kaya with its scale. Venator tried to a complete map of all possible skills. I classified them. I broke into categories: physical, mental, elemental, spatial, temporal. Each category had a basic formula. Variations were modifications of the base. The power of the Titan was a modification of the formula of the physical amplification. Voice of the Siren was a modification of the formula of effect. Silver Fog was a modification of the basic spatial shift formula. Venator saw the system. but he didn't have time to finish the map. He was burned at the stake in his 40th year of work. Kai picked up where the dead alchemist left off, with one advantage. He understood why the formulas worked. He saw the molecular logic. He could predict the result before brewing. Venator worked by trial and error. Kai worked by molecular modeling, in his head, without a computer, but with 6 years of training. He began keeping a third journal, a skill map, basic formulas and their modifications. A tree of possibilities. Each branch was a new potion. Mira brought news from the street. Aurelis was in an uproar. Rumors about a shop selling skills in vials were spreading faster than Kai could control. People were whispering in the market. They were discussing it in the taverns. Someone called him the apothecary. The name stuck. The apothecary from the dead-end alley. Mira said it was bad. Rumors attract attention. Kai said it was inevitable. 20 customers. Dozens of potions sold. Every customer told at least one person. They told others. The information spread exponentially. He couldn't stop it even if he wanted to. Wolf came with more news. Worse news. The Inquisition was active again. Tess Marrow had been given a new assignment. Not to look for the shop, to look for customers. The logic was simple. If you can't find the source, you have to find those who use the product. Interrogate them. Trace the chain back. Wolf had learned this from a former colleague who worked as an informant on the border of the mercenary quarter. Tess started in the port district. She went from tavern to tavern. She talked to people. Her skill, sense of sin, allowed her to sense when a person was lying. Not the lie itself, the scent. The physical scent the body emits when lying. Micro changes in the composition of sweat. Kai froze when he heard that description. Tess Marrow's skill worked like a chromatograph, a gas analyzer for the human body. She literally sniffed out the truth. It's impossible to lie against a skill like that. You can only stay silent, or tell the truth. Kai thought it over. If Tess found one of the clients and asked where the shop was, the client wouldn't be able to lie. He would either tell the truth or stay silent. And silence itself is an answer to someone with Tess's skill. He needed to protect the clients, or make sure they didn't know the answer to the question. Kai looked at the shop's layout. Clients entered through the wall in the alley. They knew the alley. They knew the wall. If Tess asked, they wouldn't be able to lie. He had to change the system. Kai called Mira. He explained. From this day forward, no client would come to the shop. All transactions would go through intermediaries. 3 levels. The client contacts Mira. Mira passes the order through a messenger boy. The boy leaves a note at an agreed-upon location. Kai picks up the note, prepares the potion, leaves it at another agreed-upon location. The boy picks it up, passes it to Mira. Mira passes it to the client. 3 links. No one knows the entire chain. The client knows only Mira. Mira knows only the exchange point. The boy knows 2 points but doesn't know what he's carrying. Even if Tess catches someone in the chain, the trail will be broken. Mira listened. She nodded. She said it was similar to how smugglers operate. Kai replied that it was like how a cell membrane works. Each element lets through only a specific type of information. Mira didn't understand, but she did as he said. The system was launched in 2 days. Gray didn't object. Darren grumbled but agreed. The other clients accepted the new rules. Security in exchange for inconvenience. A fair price. On the 4th day after the conversation with the Avatar, Valkyr sent a reply. Not through the Avatar, through a dream. Kai was sleeping on the floor next to the cauldron and had a dream in which he was standing on top of a mountain. A man stood nearby, huge, in black armor, a face like stone, eyes like molten gold. Valkyr. The god of war spoke plainly and without embellishment. The partnership is accepted. 30 doses of the Titan elixir per month. The price is 10,000 gold per batch. In exchange, 1 night beneath the temple. Valkyr will disable the guards on the lower levels. He will neutralize the seals. He'll give 4 hours. From midnight to 4 in the morning. In 10 days. The full moon. The only night when the other gods are busy with the renewal ritual and aren't watching the temple. Valkyr said one more thing. He said he knows why Kai needs the Ark. That he doesn't care. That he needs results. A permanent skill for his army. And that if Kai betrays him, his next sleep will be his last. Kai woke up in a cold sweat. His shirt was stuck to his back. The cauldron hummed ominously. Text flashed on the screen, 40%, and falling. The contract with Valkyr is active, 10 days until the operation. Kai stood up. He washed his face with water from a jug. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the scale of it all. In 10 days, he would enter the great temple's dungeon. He would pass through 5 meters of stone and find himself in the room where the body of the slain god lay. He needed a team. He needed a plan down to the last second. And he needed to brew 30 doses of the Titan elixir in 10 days. 6 years in the lab had taught him one thing. A deadline is not a threat. A deadline is structure. Kai picked up a notebook and began writing the plan. 10 days. Kai broke them into hours. The first 5 days, production. 30 doses of Titan. 6 doses per day. Each required 2 hours of work. 12 hours per day at boiler. The rest, sleep and food. Mira provided the ingredients. The horns of the minotaur. Resin of the tree. Smugglers raised the price. Kai didn't pay without bargain. Not time to skimp. The second 5 days, preparation for surgery. Kai worked as a machine. Grinding, heating, matrice, dissolution, temperature control, filling. Each beaker is identical. We remembered every movement. On 3rd day, he brewed potions with closed eyes. On 4th, could talk with Mira and not get from track. On 5th day, 30 jars stood on the counter. 3 rows by 10. Golden. The same. Like cartridges in a magazine. Mira organized the transfer. Avatar Valkyr took the vials personally. He came at night. He examined each one. Opened one. I sniffed it. Put it back. Left the chest. 10 gold pieces. Heavy. Myrrh could lift it. Wolf carried it to corner of the where Kai had a hiding place in the floor. The money did matter. What matter only the full moon in 5 days? Kai laid out plans of the temple on the counter. Emmerich brought an updated version, more detailed. He spent a week in restricted archive of the underground level, copying records in the light a single candle. Risked his life. Every time when the guard passed by, he hid papers under his cassock. New plans revealed a ventilation lower levels, narrow channels in the walls. Too narrow for a person. But there was one anomaly on the map. The ventilation shaft on the 3rd underground level widened in one spot, near the Ark. The widening was wide enough for a thin person to squeeze through. Kai looked at himself. Thin, definitely. 2 weeks on bread and porridge had contributed to that. But the duct led only to the Ark's outer wall, not inside. 5 meters of stone remained a problem. Silver mist. 30 minutes of effect. Speed of passage through stone. Kai did the math. 5 meters of dense granite, not brick, not limestone, granite. Density 2,700 kilograms per cubic meter. The phase shift slowed proportionally to the material's density. In brick, he would have passed through 5 meters in 10 minutes. In granite, in 25. 5 minutes remained inside the Ark. 5 minutes to find the body, to take a blood sample, and get out. He couldn't get out. He needed a second dose of silver mist inside. But there was only enough phase serpent scales left for 1 dose. 1. Mira had searched the entire city for scales. The smugglers didn't have any. The black market didn't have any. Phase serpents lived in the mountains 300 miles from Aurelis. Delivery would take a month. Kai had 5 days. He sat by the cauldron and thought. The cauldron read 42%. Venator's formulas swirled in his head, and among them, something flashed. Not a recipe, a note, a personal entry by Venator. Venator had written that phase snakes shed their skin once a year. The scales had to be fresh. Old ones lose their properties within a month. But there was an alternative. A phase snake's saliva possessed the same properties as the scales, only 10 times weaker. He would need 10 times as much. Kai reread it. Saliva. 10 times weaker. Useless. He had neither the saliva nor a 10-fold supply. But the entry continued. Venator experimented with the concentration of the saliva. Evaporation yielded a 3-fold increase. Distillation yielded a 5-fold increase. Venator stopped at 5-fold and noted that it wasn't enough. Kai didn't stop. A 5-fold concentration through distillation. Venator had used simple distillation, 1 cycle. Kai knew about fractional distillation, multi-stage. Each cycle increased the concentration. 3 cycles would yield a 15-fold increase, more than the scale. But that required the saliva of a phase snake, which was also missing. Kai looked at jar number 44, empty, where the scales had once lain. There was something at the bottom of the jar. He tilted the jar. A drop glinted in the light. Small, viscous, shimmering. Saliva. The snake had been kept in this jar. It had left saliva on the glass. A single drop. Kai scooped up the drop with the tip of a knife. He placed it in the smallest flask of those made by the glassblower. The drop weighed less than a gram. At 15 times magnification, that would be enough for a single dose. Barely. He began the distillation. Fractional distillation in a medieval laboratory. Without a thermometer. No vacuum. No condenser. Kai assembled a condenser from 2 flasks and a copper tube that Wolf had brought from the blacksmith. Primitive. Rough. But it worked. The first cycle took 4 hours. The drop had shrunk by half, but the concentration had tripled. The second cycle took 3 hours. The drop became almost invisible. Kai worked on it under a magnifying glass he'd haggled for from a watchmaker. The third cycle took 2 hours. A microdrop remained at the end, shimmering, pulsating, alive. The cauldron confirmed it. The concentration was 16 times higher than the original, enough for a single dose of silver mist. Kai brewed the potion. Moonstone dust, the essence of mist, saliva concentrate instead of scales. The process took an hour. The result? Silver mist. High quality. Not as excellent as with scales, but sufficient. Phase shift, 25 minutes. Probability of getting stuck, 2%. Not 0, 2%. Kai stared at the number. A 2% chance that he would get stuck inside 5 meters of granite. Forever. In the stone. Fully conscious. 2%. He placed the vial next to the first one. 2 doses. 1 for entry, 1 for exit. For entry, excellent quality. 0% risk. For exit, high quality. 2%. Kai looked at the ceiling. The dean was asleep. Mira sat against the wall and said nothing. She had heard about the 2%. Kai had said that in his world, 2% was an acceptable risk for an experimental procedure. Mira had asked what an experimental procedure was. Kai had replied that it was when you do something for the first time and hope it won't be the last. Full moon in 2 days. Kai took out a journal. He opened the page with the operation plan. Midnight. Valcour disables the guards and the seals. Wolf and Mira stay outside. Cover. Kai enters through the main entrance and descends to the first underground level. Through the ventilation shaft to the third. Silver mist. 5 meters of granite. The ark. The body of the 10th god. A blood sample. The second silver mist. Back through the granite. 2%. The ventilation shaft up. Exit by 4 in the morning. Kai closed the journal. He looked at the vials, at the cauldron, at his hands, the hands of a chemist. Not a warrior, not a thief, not a hero. In 2 days, these hands were to touch the body of a dead god. Kai lay down on the floor. He closed his eyes. He fell asleep instantly. His body knew there would be nowhere to sleep for the next 2 days. Full moon. Kai stood at the entrance to Great Temple and looked up. 6 stories of white stone, spires stretching into night sky. The hung right above the central dome, huge, yellow, so close that it seemed you could touch. The city was asleep. The streets were empty. The ritual of renewal began an hour ago. 8 gods gathered in the heavenly hall on the floor of the temple. Valkur the 9th. He was there. And at the same time here, Kai felt his presence like warmth on the back of my neck, like a gaze whose but you know that it is there. Wolf stood in shadow by the wall. The sword is drawn. His is calm. He drank the elixir of the Titan 10 minutes ago. 1 hour of divine power. If anything goes wrong right, Wolf will be line of defense. Mira disappeared into the alley across the street. The potion of heightened senses. She heard every rustle within a radius 200 meters. If a guard appears, Kai finds out in minute before that as they reach the door. Emmerich was waiting inside. He entered through service entrance 2 hours ago. At they were allowed be in the temple for prayer. No one will ask why Brother Emmerich is praying in the hall and not in the living room. Kai entered. The head hall of the dome was huge. The columns were as a tree. The ceiling so high that it moved in the darkness. Candles along the walls cast a dim light. It smelled incense and something ancient. Stone that absorbed prayers for centuries. Kai walked quickly. He running. Running draws attention. Footsteps on the stone floor echoed. He counted the turns. The first left, second to the right, stairs down. Emmerich was waiting by the door for the basement level. The door was open. Seal on it faded, flickering, but it burned. Valkur held his word. They went down. The first underground level, the core of relics. Long corridor, niches in the walls. In each something glistened and shimmered. Kai didn't look. Not the time. No guards. Empty posts. Kai and Emmerich passed through the storeroom in 4 minutes. The staircase to the second level. The archive of forbidden texts. A door with a seal, also inactive. Inside, shelves from floor to ceiling. Scrolls, books, stone tablets. Thousands of texts the gods deemed dangerous. Emmerich lingered. His eyes darted across the shelves. For 20 years he had dreamed of reading what was kept here. Kai touched his shoulder. Emmerich nodded. Later. If there is a later. The staircase to the 3rd level. It was darker here, colder. The walls were damp. The ceiling was low. Kai lit the torch that Emmerich had prepared in advance. The flame illuminated the corridor that led to a dead end. A wall. Smooth. No door. No crack. 5 meters of granite. Behind it, the ark. Kai found a ventilation shaft, a narrow opening in the wall 2 meters up. Emmerich gave him a lift. Kai squeezed inside. His shoulders pressed against the stone on both sides. Darkness. Dust. The smell of centuries. He crawled, slowly, on his elbows and knees. The duct curved. Twice Kai thought he was stuck. Twice he forced his way through, scraping the skin off his shoulders. 15 minutes later, the shaft widened. Kai could get down on all fours, then stand up straight. The widening Emmerich had mentioned, a small chamber, a ventilation control panel, and a wall. That very one. 5 meters of granite between him and the ark. Kai took out the first vial. Silver mist. Excellent quality. 0% risk. He drank it in 1 gulp. The taste was like a breath of winter air. A chill ran through his body from his throat to his fingertips. Kai looked at his hand. It was still there. It looked normal. He held it out toward the wall. His fingers sank into the stone, like into water, cold, heavy water. He felt the density of the granite, pressure from all sides, but he passed right through it. Kai stepped into the wall. The darkness became absolute. He couldn't see a thing. He felt only the pressure of the stone around him, as if he were swimming in concrete. Every step took effort, not physical, mental. His brain screamed that this was impossible, that he was inside the stone, that he would die. Kai counted his steps. 1 meter, 2, 3. The pressure was mounting. The stone was getting denser, or so it seemed. 4 meters. It was hard to breathe. Not because there was no air. Air isn't needed in a phase shift. Because panic was squeezing his chest. 5 meters. Kai emerged. Light hit his eyes. Not from a torch, not from a candle. A blue glow, soft, pulsating, like a heartbeat. The ark. A round room. Walls, ceiling, and floor made of the same granite. 10 paces in diameter. And in the center, a sarcophagus. Stone, simple, unadorned, without inscriptions. Kai approached. The lid of the sarcophagus was translucent, like frosted glass, and through it he saw a body. Human at first glance. A man, young, or eternally young. Pale blue skin. That's where the light was coming from. The body glowed, quietly, steadily, like a lamp. Eyes closed. His hands were folded across his chest. His face bore an expression of peace. Not death. Peace. The 10th god. The god of alchemy. Killed by his own brothers and sisters for wanting to give the formulas to the people. Kai stood and watched. The seconds ticked away. 20 minutes remained from the first dose. 25 minutes for the return journey through the stone. 5 minutes. He lifted the lid. Heavy. But in the phase shift, his hands passed through the edge and the lid gave way. The body lay in the sarcophagus. Kai leaned over. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from realization. He was a chemist from the 21st century, standing before the body of a god in the crypt of a medieval temple and about to draw blood from him. He didn't have a syringe. He had a knife, a small one, the very same one from Venator's box. Kai made an incision on the god's arm, a shallow one, careful, and the blood flowed, golden, thick, glowing, alive. The god had been dead for 1,000 years. His blood was alive. Kai collected the blood in a vial. 3 milliliters, 4, 5. The vial was half full, enough. He closed the lid of the sarcophagus. He looked at the god's face one last time, and froze. The god's eyes were open, blue, bright, staring straight at Kai. The god's lips moved, no sound, just movement, a single word. Kai read his lips. Finish. The eyes closed, the glow dimmed. The god was asleep again. Or he was dead, or something in between. Kai stood with his heart pounding and a vial of golden blood in his hand. 15 minutes since the first dose. Time. He took out the second vial. 2%. His hands weren't shaking. Strange. He had just seen a dead god open his eyes. His hands should have been shaking. They weren't. Kai drank. Cold. A step into the wall. Darkness. Pressure. Counting. 1 meter. 2. 3. At the 4th meter he felt resistance. The stone grew denser, or the potion was wearing off. 2%. Kai didn't stop. He pushed forward. His body passed through the granite, but more slowly, like through honey. 4.5 meters. The resistance grew. Kai clenched his teeth and took a step. The last one. He tumbled out of the wall into the ventilation chamber, fell to his knees, the vial of blood in his hand, intact. He was breathing, fast, deeply. The air had never tasted so good. The phase shift ended a second after he emerged from the stone. 1 second. He had traversed 5 meters of granite with a margin of 1 second. 2% had decided to be on his side tonight. Kai returned to the shop at dirty, ragged, with skin on shoulders from ventilation duct, and with a glass of blood in inner pocket. Mer was waiting by the entrance. She looked at him. I asked anything. She poured some water. Kai drank it. Then some more. Then sat on floor and took out a jar. He sat in front of the cauldron. Golden liquid shimmered in the dam, of which was breaking through the cracks in the boards of the dam. The boiler hummed, louder than usual. The surface went rippled. The text appeared and disappeared. It flickered, as if the system was rebooting. Then it stabilized. Blood of the 10th god, god of alchemy. The name Teros contains a basic matrix of all skills, the complete code, unencrypted. Kai read it over. The complete code, all skills. Every skill that existed in this world. Every skill the gods bestowed at birth. The entire system. In a single vial. Kai leaned toward the cauldron and mentally asked to see the structure. The surface filled with formulas. Hundreds, thousands. They flowed like a river. Kai couldn't read that fast, but the cauldron was loading them directly into his memory, through his hand resting on the bronze side. He felt the information entering his head. Not words, not images. Structures. Molecular architectures of incredible complexity. Every skill was a complex of hundreds of molecules working together, like a biochemical computer, like an organism within an organism. And Teros had created them all. One god, one alchemist, thousands of skills. Kai sat by the cauldron for 4 hours. When he stood up, Venator's knowledge read 50%, but that no longer mattered. Teros's blood contained something Venator's formulas lacked, the final element, the binding agent, the thing that made the skill permanent. Venator called it an anchor, a molecule that embedded itself in the DNA, forever. It altered the genetic code. It made the skill a part of the body, not a temporary effect, a permanent trait. Kai understood why Venator hadn't been able to finish the work. The anchor required Teros's blood, not a substitute, not an analog, specifically his blood, specifically his molecules. The 9 gods didn't kill Teros simply out of envy. They eliminated the anchor's sole source. Without it, skills could only be distributed at birth, through a ritual, controlled, monopolized. With Teros's blood, anyone could acquire a skill, at any age, forever. Kai looked at the vial, 5 milliliters. A single dose of the anchor required 1/10 of a milliliter, 50 doses. 50 people who would gain a permanent skill. After that, the blood would run out, and returning to the Ark would be impossible. Valkyr would block access as soon as he got his share. Or maybe not, if Kai gave him what he promised. The problem lay elsewhere, in the choice. 50 doses. To whom? Valkyr wanted an army. Lyra Vane wanted diplomacy. Wolf wanted self-respect. And Kai wanted skills to stop being a privilege. He thought for 2 days. Didn't sleep, didn't eat. Paced the shop from corner to corner. Mira brought food and took it away untouched. Wolf stood by the entrance and said nothing. Emmerich sat in the corner reading Venator's notes, which Kai had given him to translate. On the 3rd day, Kai gathered everyone. He explained. 50 doses. He wouldn't give them all to Valkyr, and he wouldn't sell them one by one. He would take 5 milliliters and divide them up like this. 10 doses for Valkyr, part of the contract. Enough so the god wouldn't start a war. 10 doses for sale, to clients who deserve it. Wolf is first on the list. He'll seal 20 doses and hide them, a reserve, insurance, in case something goes wrong. And he'll spend 10 doses on research. He'll try to synthesize an anchor without Teros's blood. If it works, the source will become endless. Any person, any skill, forever. Mira said he's crazy. Wolf said he's just. Emmerich said he's doing what Taros wanted. Kai began his work. The first dose of a permanent skill. For Wolf. The ingredients for the basic skill potion. A minotaur's horn for physical strength. Resin from the world tree for stabilization. Moon salt as a catalyst. And 1/10 of a milliliter of golden blood. The anchor. The brewing process took 6 hours. The most complex synthesis of Kai's life. The temperature regime changed 12 times. The order of adding the ingredients was critical. The anchor was added last, at exactly 52 degrees. No more, no less. Kai measured the temperature by the viscosity of the liquid. 6 years of training. An eye like a thermometer. The potion changed color 7 times. The final color was gold, like the blood of Taros, like the eyes of the avatar Valkyr, like coins in a hiding place under the floor. The cauldron showed the result. A potion of permanent skill, divine power, permanent. Excellent quality, no side effects, irreversible. Kai stared at the word, irreversible, forever. He held in his hands what Venator had died for, what the 9 gods had killed the 10th for, what Kai had walked through 5 meters of granite with a 1-second margin for. Freedom in a vial. Wolf stood at the counter. He looked at the golden liquid. His hands did not tremble. His face was calm. Kai held out the vial, said it was forever. Divine power, permanently. No timer, no side effects. Wolf took the vial, looked Kai in the eyes, asked how much. Kai answered, nothing. The first dose is free, for 32 years without the skill. Wolf didn't answer. He drank, closed his eyes, opened them, and Kai saw that something had changed. Not in Wolf's body, in his eyes. Depth, calm. A confidence that didn't depend on the potion because the potion would never run out. Wolf clenched his fist, unclenched it, quietly, without fanfare, just checking. Then he turned and walked out, through an invisible wall, into the night. Mira watched him go, then at Kai. She asked if she could too. Kai replied that she could, but first they had to decide which skill. Once and for all, it's forever. Mira thought for a moment. For the first time, Kai saw her lost in thought. Rumors exploded within a week. Wolfstone mercenary without skill now had a skill. Permanent, not temporary, not potion for now, forever. He didn't hide it. He could and didn't. At the courtyard in the guild, he lifted a stone block weighing ton and held it on outstretched arms while the rest mercenaries stopped to count the seconds. 30. 22 years without practice. Now the skill was there. And the Aurelis about this. Mira chose heightened sensations. Constant. Kai scolded her on the 3rd day after Wolf. Mira drank. She froze. Then she smiled. She said that she could have a rat on the other end is gnawing grain. Kai replied that it's unlikely that to the other end. Mira said that it matter. What matters that she can? Here's the world, all of it, in its entirety, and it is beautiful. Kai cooked 10 doses for Valkyra, various skills, strength, speed, stone skin, regeneration. Valkyr received his share of the contract. The avatar picked up the vials in person. He examined each one. He nodded. He said Valkyr was satisfied. Buy. Kai sold 4 doses to clients. Gray gained permanent heightened senses. He paid 3,000 gold pieces without haggling. Darren Fox gained a permanently clear mind. 5,000. The huntress from the north gained permanent regeneration. 2,000. The magistrate's bodyguard gained stone skin. 4,000. 6 doses remained for sale, 20 in reserve, 10 for research, and 35% of the golden blood had already been spent. Kai was working on synthesizing the anchor, every night. He analyzed the molecular structure through the cauldron. He tried to find a replacement for Teros's blood, something that could embed the skill into DNA without the divine component. So far, it hadn't worked. The anchor molecule was too complex, too specific, like a key to a lock that no longer exists. Venator's knowledge had reached 60%, then 70%. With every percentage point, Kai saw deeper. Venator had spent the last 10 years of his life on the same task, synthesizing the anchor, without the god's blood. And he hadn't made it in time either. But he left notes, directions, ideas he hadn't tested. Kai tested them one by one. The problem was in the fourth element, the very one that didn't exist in the periodic table, the element from the blood of a god. Without it, the anchor didn't work. Without it, the skill remained temporary. Kai was looking for a workaround. The world around the shop was changing. Aurelis was buzzing. Permanent skills. People who were born without a gift now had one. Bought, chosen, their own. Not the one the gods assigned, their own. People weren't whispering in the market square anymore. They were speaking out loud. The apothecary from the dead-end alley gives skills, real ones, forever. The line of people waiting would stretch from the shop to the palace if anyone knew where the shop was. Mira filtered them. Only the verified. Only through a chain of intermediaries. Only after payment. Prices had risen. 3,000, 5, 10. People paid. Kai didn't rejoice in the money. He counted the doses. Every vial sold depleted the supply of a non-renewable resource. The Pantheon reacted on the 12th day. Not the Valcours, the other 8. The high priest announced in the temple that a new form of heresy had emerged. Someone was handing out skills, bypassing the gods. It was blasphemy, sacrilege, the punishment, the stake. The Inquisition was granted expanded powers. Tess Marrow received a squad of 20 fighters, with skills, real ones, bestowed by the gods. They began combing through the city, block by block, house by house. Tess used the scent of sin at full power. Anyone who smelled of potions was dragged off for questioning. Mira came with the news, white as a sheet. She said they'd caught one of the middlemen, a young messenger, 14 years old. They'd interrogated him for 3 hours. He knew nothing. He only knew the drop-off point. Tess sensed he wasn't lying. She let him go. But the drop-off point was now guarded by 2 Inquisition fighters. The chain had been compromised. Kai rebuilt the system overnight. New drop-off points, new routes, new middlemen. Each knew only their own section. The cell membrane had grown thicker. But the problem ran deeper than logistics. Tess Marrow wasn't looking for a shop. She was looking for clients. People with permanent skills and no divine mark. And she found them. Gray vanished from the city the day after the Inquisition began its raids. A professional. He sensed the danger before anyone else. Darren Fox couldn't just vanish. Business, family, reputation. He came to Kai at night through the wall. His hands were shaking. He said Tess Marrow had been at the Merchants Guild, asking questions, sniffing around. She hadn't found anything yet, but she'd be back. Kai looked at him and thought, a permanent skill can't be hidden. It's part of the body, part of your DNA. Tess wasn't sniffing potions. She was sniffing the absence of a mark. Divine skills smelled of the gods. Kai's skills smelled of nothing. To Tess, it was like a hole in the fabric of the world, a void where a signature should be. Kai thought for 3 days. On the 4th, he found a solution. Not perfect, temporary, but it worked. If the problem was the absence of a mark, he needed to add a mark, a fake one. Kai studied the structure of the divine signature through the cauldron. Every skill granted by the gods carried a molecular mark, a unique one, like a watermark. 9 different marks for 9 gods. Kai couldn't reproduce a specific god's mark, but he could create noise, molecular noise that masked the absence of a mark, like static on the radio. Tess would sniff and sense not emptiness, but an indistinct signal, as if the mark were there but damaged or blurred. This wouldn't arouse suspicion. Skills sometimes faded with age. The signatures were fading. Kai brewed a masking potion overnight. Simple. 1 dose a week. Enough to create molecular noise around the skill. He handed it out to the clients. Darren took the first dose and exhaled. He said that Kai had saved his life for the second time. Kai replied that he hadn't saved a life but a business. Darren laughed. Nervously, but he laughed. The Inquisition kept searching. Tess Marrow didn't give up, but now she was sniffing thin air. Kai's clients smelled right. Blurred, but right. Tess sensed something was off, but she couldn't prove it. 3 months had passed. Kai stood on shop that no longer was a shop. It was a laboratory. The walls were covered diagrams, 3 journals on the counter, alchemical symbols, chemical formulas, skill of skills. Boiler hummed constantly. Knowledge Venator reached 90%. 10% remained encrypted. The last block. Venator sealed it separately. For that who reaches to the end. Kai has almost the end. Synthesis of the without blood Tarosa remained impossible. The 4th element, the divine component. It cannot be reproduced from earthly ingredients. Kai tried everything, every combination, every approach, fractional distillation, molecular recombination, catalytic synthesis. None. 4th element existed only in the blood of the gods. From 50 doses, 18, 20 in reserve, minus 2 spent on unsuccessful experiments. 18. Of the 10 research units, 3 remained. 7 were used for synthesis attempts. Each one failed. Each one brought him closer to understanding, but not to a result. Valcour sent an avatar with a new demand. Another 30 doses of permanent skills. Not temporary ones, permanent ones, for the elite guard. Kai replied that he couldn't. Resources were limited. The avatar said that Valcour was dissatisfied. Kai replied that a god's dissatisfaction didn't create molecules out of nothing. The avatar left. Kai knew this was a problem. Valcour had received 10 doses and wanted more. The god of war was not used to hearing the word no. Mira brought news from the city. The Pantheon had split. Valcour was openly in conflict with the other 8. He had what they did not. Soldiers with permanent skills. 10 fighters, each worth hundreds. The other gods demanded explanations. Valcour remained silent. The tension grew. Emmerich arrived with news from the temple. The high priest had convened an emergency council. The gods were quarreling. For the first time in 300 years. The reason? Unmarked skills. Permanent ones. Impossible without divine intervention. One of the gods was helping a heretic. Suspicion fell on Valcour. Valcour denied it. 7 gods didn't believe him. 1 god of wisdom remained silent. War between the gods was a matter of weeks. Kai sat in the shop and looked at the 18 vials in the hiding place. He was beginning to understand what he had done. 26 years old. A chemist. A postdoc. A man who wanted to brew potions and sell freedom in a bottle. And he started a religious war. Mira said the war would happen with or without him. That the gods had always quarreled. That he had simply given people a choice. Kai replied that choice was good. War over choice was bad. Mira shrugged and said that every good thing in history began with a bad war. Kai didn't argue. Instead, he returned to the Cauldron. 90% of Venator's knowledge. 10% remained locked away. Kai pushed the system every day. The Cauldron resisted. The final block demanded something. Not time, not knowledge, something else. Kai didn't understand what. He spent the night rereading Venator's notes, personal ones, not formulas, thoughts, doubts, fears. Venator wrote about Teros, about the god who wanted to give the formulas to the people. Teros believed that skills belonged to everyone, that a monopoly was a prison, that every person has the right to choose who to be. Venator stole the formulas from Teros's blood a year before his execution. He worked alone, in this very workshop. He brewed, he experimented, he wrote. He knew the Inquisition was close. He knew time was short. Venator's last entry was brief. "I'm not afraid of the stake. I'm afraid the formulas will die with me. The cauldron will preserve them. Someone will come. Someone will finish." Kai sat on the floor and looked at those words. Venator didn't know that 700 years would pass. He didn't know that a chemist would come from a world where gods had become myths. He didn't know that his cauldron would end up in a museum behind glass. He simply believed that someone would come. Kai placed his hand on the cauldron. The warm bronze hummed, and 90% became 91. Then 2, 3, 5. The lock opened, not from time, from intention. Venator sealed the last 10% for whoever would understand why all this. Not for a scientist, not for a merchant, for the air. The formulas poured out in a torrent. Kai clutched his head. Too much, too fast, like a fire hose to the face. He saw everything. Venator's entire system, all 40 years, every experiment, every failure, every breakthrough. And at the very bottom, at the very end, the final formula. The formula Venator had found the day before his arrest. The one he hadn't had time to test. The one he'd scribbled into the cauldron with trembling hands while they were pounding on the door. The synthesis of the fourth element, without the blood of the gods, from 3 ingredients: lunar salt, purified to the absolute, not a single impurity; resin from the world tree, aged for 100 years, a century-old resin; and the third ingredient, the alchemist's blood, not a god's, a human's, who had absorbed Venator's knowledge to 100%, whose blood had changed, whose DNA had absorbed the formulas, who had become an ingredient himself. Kai looked at the formula, then at his hands, then at the cauldron. The cauldron showed 100%, and a new line, class updated, forbidden synthesizer. The carrier's blood is ready for use. Kai laughed, quietly, then louder, then fell silent. Venator had found the answer, not in the ingredients, in the alchemist himself. The man who had absorbed all of Venator's knowledge was becoming the living fourth element. His blood replaced the blood of the god, not identical, but sufficient. An anchor made of human blood, weaker than the divine, but functional. Kai took out a knife. He made an incision on his finger. A drop of blood fell into the cauldron. The liquid flared up. Not fire, light, golden, like Teros's blood. For a single second, then it went out. The cauldron showed the result. The fourth element, synthesized, high quality. The anchor is functional. The skill is permanent. Limit, 1 dose per day. More blood is dangerous for the bearer. 1 dose per day, 365 doses a year, endlessly. As long as the alchemist lives. Kai sat on the floor with a cut finger and watched the golden glow in the cauldron. He had become the source, not a god, a man. A chemist from the 21st century who had fallen into the past and become a living formula. Tess Marrow found a bench at dawn. Kai wasn't surprised. He expected it. 3 months of hiding. 3 months of molecular noise. 3 months of deception of right nose in Aurelis. But Tess was a professional. She didn't sniff. She was thinking. And figured out the alley by the grid of exceptions. All dead-end streets in the city on the map. All verified. All except one. Alley by Venator's Venators. which according to the documents of the Inquisition was erased a year ago. Tess came alone, without the squad, without weapons. She walked through the wall, even did slow down, as if she knew. Kai stood by the cauldron. Mira was sitting in corner. Wolf stood by the wall, hand on sword. Tess Marrow, 38 years old, short, thin, short hair with gray streaks, face without expression. Eyes are empty as the sky before the rain. 14 alchemists were burned under her supervision. She looked at the bench, on shelves, at the boiler, on Kaya, and she on floor. She just sat down, without invitation, without threats. Wolf tensed up. Kai raised his hand. Wait. Tess spoke up. Quiet, evenly, without emotion. She said that she had been forbidden potions for years. What is skill's sense of smell of not from the gods? It drank it. When she was 18, she found a jar among the alchemist whose herself had to the Inquisition, the first of 14. I drank out of curiosity. The skill manifested within minute, temporary. At 6 hours, she had another, a glass, and another, and more. 20 years. Every 3 days a new dose. Without a dose the habit weakens. Without a dose it just person. Without skill, her career in Inquisition will end. Without a career, it, her. Tess looked at Kaya. She said that she needed a hit. Without potion, the Inquisition will notice that her skill is gone. Without her, her will be first. The Inquisitor drinking forbidden potions. The irony that will end in a bonfire. Kai listened. Mira looked at Tess with an expression that was hard to read. Not hate, not pity. Something more complex. Understanding. Kai asked why she had to him, but not just found another source of potions. Tess replied, "That's that the other alchemists are dead. All 14. She killed her only source, with her own. And that's because she had about constant skills, forever. Without doses every 3 days, without fear that tomorrow a glass won't come." Kai was silent for a minute, then said that he could do better, can do forever. The sense of sin, constant, her own, not stolen, not temporary, but it needs something in return, not money, not silence. Tess asked what? Kai replied, access to the temple. Again, no, in Ark, deeper. In the archive of banned texts on 2nd level, there are entries about Taros, about the 10th god. Notes that may contain a way to break the monopoly once and for all. Not 50 doses, not 1 dose per day. For everyone, forever. Tess looked at him, gray eyes, 20 years on herbs, 20 years of lies, 14 bonfires on her conscience. She asked what he wanted find. Kai replied, the body of God. Tess didn't blink. She asked which one. Kai said, Taros, god of alchemy, killed by the others 9, the one whose blood he had used for mastering skills, that who wanted to give formulas to the people. Tess was silent for a long time. Then she asked why he a body if blood already there. Kai explained, the blood is running out. His own blood is but 1 dose a day. That's not enough. Too little for that he had in mind. Taros developed skills, all skills. His body held not just blood, it held the matrix, the code. If Kai can copy the matrix and transfer it to boiler, then the boiler will be a generator. Any skill, for any person, no restrictions. Tess asked, does understands that this means, what the gods will be needed, that Pantheon will collapse, that the world will change. Kai replied that yes, understood. Tess stood up. She wiped her on her raincoat. She said that she would get it to the temple, through 3 days, at night. 3A through only the Inquisition. right to the second level, past the guards, past seals, past the gods. And what does needs A? A steady practice to that as they go. Because that, if everything goes as she wants to have, sense of forever, but not until the next missed glass. Kai brewed a potion for Tess in that same day. The Odd of Sin, constant. Tess drank. She closed her eyes, opened them. She took in. And for the first time in the conversation, her face changed. No smile, not tears. Relief. 20 years of fear are over in one swallow. After 3 days, they entered the temple. Tess led the way. Kai followed. Secret passage of the Inquisition began in the basement of the house across from the temple. A narrow tunnel. Damp. Dark. I walked straight into the word of the underground level. Kai didn't go any lower. The Ark did need he was archive. Entries about Taros. Emmerich was waiting inside. He had spent a month cataloging the archive. He knew where what was located. He kayed to the section which called Forbidden History. Scrolls, dozens, hundreds, records by eyewitnesses of events from ago. The murder of Taros. Kai read for about hours. Emmerich translated ancient dialects. Tess stood at the entrance and sniffed the air. With her new constant skill. Clean. No one. Kai found it he in the scroll without a number. The data by the priest who was present at the murder of Taros. Taros did resist. He knew that he would be killed. He was preparing. For day before he did something. He had a copy of the Matrix. Is into his body. In own cauldron. Bronze cauldron which he took his last disciple. Who later ended up to Venator. Who then turned out in museum. Which then drew Kai. Kai dropped the scroll. The Matrix was in Cauldron. All the days from the day. Boiler doesn't just kept Venator's Venator. He kept the original source Taros. The complete matrix of all skills. Generator. Infinite. Kai didn't seen him because that didn't was ready. Knowledge on 1%. Class. Forbidden synthesizer. Blood alchemist as the fourth element. Everything this was keys. The day was in the boiler. Always. Kai returned to the shop running, out of breath, with scraped arms from the tunnel. I fell to his in front of the boiler. He placed both palms on the bronze and asked, not in my mind, out loud, for the first time, he said that ready, that he knows, that understands why Taros created skills, not for the gods, for people. What Venator died for this, that Kai is to live for this. The boiler began to hum, no as usual, louder, deeper. The sound came from the floor, from the walls, from the air. The bench was shaking. The jars clinked on shelves. Mira jumped for the wall. Wolf drew his sword. Tess squinted. The surface of the inn cauldron flashed golden, bright, blinding. Kai didn't took his eyes. Text, huge, across the surface. The matrix Taros, activated. The boiler is a generator of skills. Restriction removed. Any skill. To a person. All the time. A demand. Blood of the forbidden synthesizer. 1 drop per dose. Kai looked. 1 drop. Not dose. A drop. From 1 drop of a cauldron could produce 10 doses of continuous skill. From 10 drops 100. The human body contains about 5 liters of blood. Kai didn't bother counting. The number didn't matter. What mattered was that the source had become endless. As long as he was alive, the cauldron worked. As long as the cauldron worked, anyone could gain a skill. Kai stood up. He looked at Mira, at Wolf, at Tess, at Emmerich, who entered behind them, out of breath and pale. 4 people in a small shop behind an invisible wall. A thief with constant emotions. A mercenary with constant strength. An inquisitor with a constant sense of smell. A monk without faith. And a chemist from the future whose blood had become the key to freedom. Kai said they had a problem. A big one. Valcour would find out. The Pantheon would find out. Everyone will find out. And everyone will want to control the cauldron, or destroy it. Wolf said he wouldn't let them. Mira said she would hide it. Tess said she would lead the Inquisition down a false trail. Emmerich said he would tell the truth. If you're interested in the continuation and how this manhwa ends, the final part of the story is already available on Patreon, and the link is in the description and pinned comment.